I love that I get to make exposing the truth about something a part of my job.
I had this new language to describe things that for my whole life I thought were just normal. Like the way that some men treated me and my body, that was actually assault. Or my touchy-feely grandpa is actually a pedophile.
When I watch these tapes, I see a man with a serious problem who knows that he's not going to get caught.
Was there anybody that you ever felt like you could talk to about it? Do you feel like God has forgiven you?
Absolutely.
It's hard to forgive someone who doesn't ask for forgiveness.
My stuff I went through, it's never as big as what you've had to go through.
Of course I feel responsible. She's my kid and I've always wanted to protect her. If you stay angry and can't forgive somebody, you're drinking the poison yourself. You've got to let go.
I would like to not have my relationship with my mom end.
I'm writing to you as you may have been a past patient of William Flickinger, and I'm in the process of seeking accountability for my grandfather's actions.
If I can be the one to step forward and on the record say, he did this, you can't deny it. It's the very least that I can do.
Look back in time for 1 second. If I can figure out how to do this while we're, yeah, here we go.
When you I can tell you when you interviewed me last
all right.
time.
Well, you would know, wouldn't you? Because of course it was your last.
It was for the Human Rights Watch Film Festival, which is in June.
Oh.
And it was 2014. So it's almost a decade ago.
Wow. I love it.
Yeah.
How is it that we all look younger though? That's the question. I don't know.
I know.
Miracle of filters. No.
Exactly.
At least on my end. Well, anyway, regardless, that's fantastic. 10 years later. Yeah, I was telling Amanda, this is like 13 years of this show.
Wow.
You know, for better for worse. If I could use some time off, but like how it has to continue, I feel like, you know. I don't know.
Exactly. Yeah.
Anyway, maybe you could take it over, Rachel.
Well, Amanda is the podcaster.
Oh.
So maybe Amanda can do that.
Oh.
I
Well,
just attempted a podcast.
You what?
I did a podcast.
You did? Like as in
did.
hosted one?
Yeah. That's kind of like adjacent to the film.
Yeah, right. So it was a limited type of.
Yeah.
How many episodes did you do? And I'm sure it was far more produced than this thing.
Five, and then we have one bonus episode coming out.
And what is it called?
Trauma Town. It's kind of just like a space for me to unpack a lot of the threads that were presented in the film. We have one episode where of me and Rachel.
Oh,
You wanted to call it catch up with mustard, right?
That'll be for another.
Oh my God.
podcast.
That's
I know.
beyond.
It's too good.
That was what I wanted. I like that.
I think you
know.
have to have another podcast just to do that.
I know.
Amanda.
I'm gonna
agree.
keep that one on a shelf. That's the only project I've ever had a name for before I've known what the project is.
It really so obvious yet so amazingly clever at the same time. So to just segue from the topic of condiments to the film. Thank you guys. First of all, let me start with that. Okay. Thank you both. Thank you both for trusting me with a conversation about this film and about what the film is about. I really appreciate that. And try to do the best I can. and honor the story, honor your family, you know, and all the hard work you guys obviously put into this film. Can you start off by telling me, like, just basically how your roads crossed, how the origin story of and by the way, amazing title, great photo, lovely life. We'll get to that. But it really was that took a storyteller's eye to figure that out, like to call the film that.
It was really a challenge to come up with something that wasn't super sensational or corny. So we're happy with it. It was something that my grandfather wrote on the back of a photograph that he had sent us over the years. So it just spoke very truly to the kind of delusion that my family lived in. So the question that you had, was that about our origin story or the film?
Yeah. Well,
Rachel,
I wanted to start it up because it's not that unusual. I've run into this, a few times where you have a filmmaker and then you have somebody who's telling a story, and the two kind of end up working together, putting it out in the world. This has happened a number of times. So I just wondered how you guys you met, and how you just kind of figured out how to tell this, why and you wanted to do it, and the process, I guess, of how you were going to go about it. It's a lot of questions in one.
Rachel, do you want to take?
Now I can just not talk for the rest of the.
Rachel, I'll let you take the how we met, and then I can get into the rest.
So Amanda and I actually met in like 2013. We were doing the risk course at the Bronx Documentary Center for teaching conflict and hostile environment journalists how to to learn medical care and skills to like save colleagues and themselves. And because Amanda and I, we didn't even know each other at the time, but we had both lived in Cairo in Egypt, and we're covering various aspects of the Arab Spring. And we didn't meet though until we were actually in the Bronx. And I was doing my Kickstarter for my first film that you interviewed me on before. And so I wasn't paying as much of attention as I should have been. But I remembered Amanda there was like a final program that you have at the final night where you get to show this piece. And I remember like still in my head, Amanda like finishing editing it. And it was this really lovely like POV perspective of her, filming, having her GoPro like on her head and then taking photos at the same time. So you get to see like that interaction between what she was taking and what she was experiencing. And I loved it.
In Cairo.
In Cairo, yeah. And so it's still like it stuck with me. So then when Amanda reached out to me, well, actually, before that, when Amanda first went to interview her grandpa, I was a part of a small group of us from that, the training course that actually gave Amanda a little bit of money to like help her afford to go down there. So I was one of the first investors of the film as well.
Wow.
And,
okay.
Yeah. And eventually, I mean, I'll let Amanda talk about, the experience of the first interview, but eventually Amanda got in touch with me to kind of chat about what do you do to go about making a film by yourself when you have never done it before. So that's kind of how I came on board, just kind of like from afar, trying to give advice, and eventually like trying to explain like how to shoot and also hold that emotional space at the same time is so hard to do it by yourself. So I was like, I'm just going to come. Like, I'll just come in and I'll help you shoot. And that was in like 2016. So, and then now many years later, but
yeah,
that's how it started. But, Amanda's startup, like actually, like creating the film is a little bit started a couple years before then.
Yeah, I had I was going through a couple things at the same time, and it was like I was dealing with the new language and understanding of a sexual assault I had experienced while my grandmother was dying, and all of these events were kind of, I was also starting my career as a photojournalist. I was like 2 years in, and yeah, it was just really, all of it was reframing how I saw my childhood and, what I thought was normal, which was, someone like my grandpa, and, the way that women are treated, or, in this case, also children. So, yeah, I was just desperate to get more, clarity from my family. I was so confused why we had never talked about it. And so I started with him, and I went down to interview him. He was more than happy to. He was mostly estranged from the family, so I think he was just really happy to have somebody coming down. And, I just kind of put my little journalism hat on, and tried to keep my feelings and, to myself. And he opened up far more than I expected. So, and at that point, I wasn't expecting to make a film. I thought it'd be some like still images with audio over top. So, yeah, it started there, and then I kept just pulling the thread and trying to learn how the hell to make a film.
Yeah. Did it make sense to you when you guys obviously had a conversation about Rachel maybe playing more of a role in the making of the film,
Mhm.
and could also provide some objective,
Being an
role.
outsider. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
That was
So,
really, really important, because I
okay.
knew the limits of my perspective and my role. Like, so much of this is because of my closeness to it, and being able to kind of see things the way that you do when this is a family member of yours. You kind of cut through that knee-jerk reaction a lot of people have, and I've had to sit with it and think about it in a lot more depth, and that led me to want to make a film that showed that experience authentically on screen, because I've always seen very black and white narratives. So it was really, really important to have Rachel kind of as, yeah, the outsider. So, I was, doing the interviews, and we'd go through a shoot, and then I'd kind of look at her in the car afterwards and be like, well, can you tell me what you just saw? Because I know it wasn't what I just saw. So, and having that, she was almost like a translator for a normal perspective on it all. So I think with us combined, plus our like foundation of ethics as journalists, really kind of made this what it was.
Well, the the impulse to finally make this film and to be public about what happened to your family, and other families, right? At the hands of your grandfather, um, was it seems like the impulse to me, what I picked up watching it was that, um, all that you're complicit on a certain level, even just by not being public, right? By keeping the family secrets, or trying to, and no one could possibly blame, your family members for any choice they made. However, you in particular chose to go public, and to also try to reach all of his victims or survivors,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because well, I should reframe this as a question. You know, well, what was ultimately, would you say, is your motivation
I
for going
knew that
public?
I knew that I was going to be embarking on an unpredictable ride. Like, I knew that I wanted to ask questions and get clarity. And, at that point I had been, telling stories of other people and other places. And it just
Yeah.
felt like I have never seen this specific perspective. And no matter how this turns out, I think if it makes like one other person feel less alone, then that's worth it. I didn't necessarily know where it was going to go. We didn't, we kind of were, found a lot of it in the edit, because it was a lot over 8 years. So yeah, it ended up being, we let the story kind of find itself, instead of, shoehorning any specific narrative in. So.
And I think that's, I think along the way, we would talk about how making this film was like the ultimate form of accountability, because this is going to exist forever. And that in itself, it was so important to have this, like this document, and have anybody that wanted to participate be able to, so I think at the very beginning, there might have been this idea, I think, for Amanda, that this was going to like fix everything. And then, as we went along, we realized nothing is simple. And as she's pulling threads, some things like unraveled and some things, got tighter. But we couldn't have guessed, I think, really what direction things actually turned out.
Yeah, and that was one of the things at the beginning, it was obvious for me to look into that interview with him and like, what can I do? Can I press charges? Can we put him back in prison? What can we do with this? And unfortunately, unless there was a victim that wanted to go on the record and press charges, I didn't have any control in the matter. And if I would have reported, it would have dragged somebody in against their will. So that was something that we had to come to terms with pretty early on. And honestly, based on my own experience with sexual assault, acknowledgement was the strongest thing that I could have been looking for. And, we all know how horrifying the process of pursuing, legal action is for survivors. So, and for me, all I would want is an apology and like true acknowledgement. So that felt like something that was feasible and meaningful, and optional for people. It felt like, the first initial steps of, if anything were ever to kind of be swept out from under the carpet.
Yeah. And did you get to show this film much in front of audiences?
Yeah.
We had a whole year of film festivals.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, we premiered at South by last year. And then we had our last festival at IDFA in November.
Wow. And what were some of the reactions? I'm just curious. In terms of how maybe people responded to you in the film, your sister, your mom, your grandfather.
It was really validating for us because we wanted to make this film like a Rorschach test for people. We didn't want to take a side. We just wanted to present, this is how everybody is digesting this. And everybody was aligning with whoever they, felt most seen by. And that was really interesting. And a lot of times that's generational lines, because it is a real portrait of how the different generations are, the tools that we have to deal with this. The younger you get, the more tools that you have to kind of talk about trauma and mental health and think about these things. So, and I think that's something that a lot of people are dealing with in their families, regardless of the issue. It doesn't have to be as extreme as my family. So, so that, the audiences were really mixed. It was really, really mixed. There were people, usually people who had experienced this, that really appreciated the complexity of it. They felt very seen by that. And then there were people who had not experienced that were very kind of perplexed. Like, how could you hug him? How can you call him grandpa? All of these questions, which are detached from that being, the experience. But that's why we put those things in there. So you could see, hey, when a perpetrator like this is in your family, it's complicated. There's a lot of complicated emotions, and that's so valid. And a lot of survivors don't feel they can own those publicly. They don't feel like those are valid because we have such a reaction of like, well, you have to hate him, you have to put them in prison. So that was really an interesting conversation that has been playing out as a result of this film. Rachel, do you remember anything?
Yeah, it was interesting also on the size of the theater that we screened the film, because when we'd have a Q&A in a theater that was a bit smaller, it would be, everybody would just be in this like conversation, and it could keep going on. We'd always request to have longer Q&As because it would take a moment for people to kind of like settle in.
Right.
Have to, like,
I've said this many times. There's nothing less organic than having a Q&A seconds after a film ends. you know,
Yeah.
right? There's no
too
other
much.
choice, but it's like,
Yeah.
yikes, a good hour afterwards would probably make a lot more sense.
Yeah, yeah. So we'd always, Amanda would always try to push to get the longest Q&A possible, and it seemed to always pay off because there would be the types of nuance that people would start to bring up would really be like, okay, the thing that we were hoping seemed to be working. And I mean, in watching this in a group experience as well, you'd have strangers that would come up to us afterwards and tell us that they were holding hands. They had never
Mhm.
met each other. They were holding hands like to support each other through these
Wow.
moments, which is like, to know that you've made somebody feel that way, is like, it's a bit intense, but it's also like, this is what we try to do with film and with art, and is to put somebody in somebody else's shoes, to create empathy, to create understanding, to kind of close the gap a little bit. So I think that for me was, I've never like felt that or seen that in something that I've been able to work on. So it was really rewarding to see that all the time and like effort and energy and emotion that was like put out to make this seem to be working.
Yeah. The name of the documentary is called Great Photo, Lovely Life. Um, and it's fair to say co-directed
Mhm.
Mhm. Yes.
by Amanda Mustard and Rachel Beth Anderson, and it's currently on Max and HBO. I'm not sure. Okay, that's good. No mistakes. So I really struggled because, my gut feeling as I watched it, as I was getting so angry at your mother, and I just thought I have no right to be angry at her, but I was just so frustrated, like, like that, almost as much in terms of protecting her daughter. And if your mom is watching by some chance, this is not how I feel at the moment. I don't feel. I understand, and
She
yeah,
won't be. It's okay.
um, I'm very proud of your daughter, and um, both of them. And so anyway, but I felt like just being able to, she failed you or failed by putting her daughter, well, your sister, right, and
Mhm.
you're in leaving her vulnerable and exposed potentially to your
Mhm.
grandfather's, you know, to your grandfather. But and then she had another chance to kind of figure it out and to be present and to be take also responsibility and to be protect you now, you guys, and still couldn't do it. That's what I felt
Mhm.
watching it, and it just frustrated me so. I don't know. That
Yeah.
was my
I mean,
and
I
it
don't.
took kind of talking about it with others to realize it's not quite so black and white. But that as a parent of myself and as somebody who is a child of parents obviously and feels and yet has absolutely no experience being in a family that's gone through what your family's gone through. Um, I understand I also have to be quiet, I guess. Listen more about I wish your mom was on here.
Oh, I
And
do
I wouldn't
too.
be confrontational with her at all.
I know, I know. I wish that she was, more comfortable talking publicly about this, but I totally respect that, we're all taking a break right now. It's been a long 9 years.
Journey.
It's coming up on 10 years
Oh
now.
my God.
And yeah, like we're really just kind of
Yeah.
we're all just letting this air out. But yeah, it's a valid reaction for sure. And it's been one a lot of people have had. And the role of my mom in this was my personal, you know, the biggest thing that I had to kind of deal with internally through this, because when I started this, I didn't know any of that. I didn't know, the extent of my sister's abuse. I didn't know. And I yeah, like my mom, this film process was the first time that my mom was really talking about her own experience. And if you can imagine what it was like to be his daughter and be raised through the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and you're just surviving with very few tools, very little empowerment as a woman, a single mom. And, you know, she finally gets to this point where we're talking about this. And it's not very long before it goes from her story to how she enabled it. And that was really, really difficult for her. And sure, like I was frustrated. I've had many years of frustration in this process. And shout out to my therapist, Erin, for helping me get through that. And, you know, I worked really, really hard personally on processing that and understanding and landing in a place of compassion for both her and my grandma. Because, you know, what we forget is when the closer you are to someone like my grandfather, the more manipulated, the more groomed, the more kind of warped your grasp of all this is. And if there wasn't
it doesn't take long for the shame to
to just
envelop.
burrow.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And if you don't have the tools to even really recognize that how your mom let you down, you know, you're just doing what you know. And so it's like there's just this disconnect of her kind of processing her own experience that has this block up to, you know, her role kind of repeating that. So, and I do have compassion for her. She has a lot of health issues. She lives in a lot of pain, and, you know, digging this up, there are going to be limits, and it's not my place to know how talking about this feels in her body. And so when she started to draw boundaries, I had to respect them. Sure, I wished that, you know, at the end of this film process, we would have been in a different place. I didn't expect this either, but this is the reality of it. You know, there are limitations there. You know, we don't always get what we want. And, you know, I was frustrated too. But at the end of the day, this all goes back to my grandfather. None of them would have been in this situation, would have had such, you know, shitty choices to make.
To choose from, right?
Yeah. I mean, so for me, it's just the most productive to go back to him and just and it's tragic. Like, that's the thing. And that's why we wanted to make a film about this, to kind of raise awareness of what could be done now that can avoid what happened to my family.
Well, you're very evolved.
It's a lot of therapy.
And you really are a pillar. And I mean, in the sense that, and I'm not saying you haven't been through it all, but that your voice in terms of how you talk to your mother in those last moments of the film really are a real sort of, you know, salve, you know, and the that you have so much compassion for her, that these things, these emotions of disappointment, anger, yet empathy and compassion can all coexist.
Yes, I think that's one of the key takeaways, is being able to hold all of these experiences, all of these different realities.
Right.
Because, yeah, I mean, that's, I think, one of the problems with my family is they've tried the black or white kind of, my truth is the truth. And that's why everybody is so kind of disjointed, because there isn't a lot of compassion for each other's experiences. Very few of them have talked to each other. You know, even the siblings, even his 3 children, have never really talked to each other about what happened.
Right.
And I think we always talked about this too, Amanda, how, like, no matter what, like, your mom, she kept showing up. Yeah. And like, it was the 2 of you that started this, and she kept putting herself through this. And like, you know, it was like a roller coaster, but she would still show up. And she's, you know, because she did want something to change and she did want accountability. But I think there was also some like protectiveness and a coping mechanism for survival, you know, that was also in play at the same time.
Right. And denial. Being another level of like survival, right? Because she started realizing that as the story was starting to inch towards, you know, in the next layer and towards her and her part, you know. So, but I'm glad. That's true. Thank you, Rachel. The film is currently on HBO and on Max. And I recommend It's been on there for a little while.
It's a 2-month anniversary today.
Oh, good.
Happy 2 months, Great Photo Lovely Life.
Happy 2 months. Yeah.
So people should, at the end of this, should switch over and watch it. I think that's the right thing to do. And so thank you for both for doing this and taking time, and um how did that HBO thing come about? Which was it through one of the festivals?
No, I mean, for many, many years, it was just Amanda and I,
Hmm. Hmm.
being super scrappy and going through the trauma of grants and fundraisers. Poor Amanda. Like that was, I think that's, you've said this many times, but that was more traumatic, like one of the most traumatic parts of the whole process.
Oh,
Genuinely, it was
Yeah.
having to kind of continue to like write and PRify your family's trauma over
oh
and
yeah,
over and
right.
over. It's
Yeah.
like
Trauma
never
over
again.
trauma. Yeah.
Never again.
Um, and so we eventually, I think after many, many years, Amanda, she got the Wickers, which was amazing. We had Doc Society came on board. We had other like smaller grants, and then we partnered with Arc Media, and
Mhm.
they helped connect us with HBO. So HBO came on, when we were like 90% shot probably, but they came on to like push us over the finish line and all through post and the
Oh
edit.
wow,
It's
that's
amazing.
helpful.
It was, I
Yeah,
mean, it's
2021 they came on.
yeah, 2021 at the beginning.
that's really
So
recent. Yeah.
yeah, so I mean, it was, I felt so grateful to be able to just focus on the film,
Mhm.
and that felt like such a luxury to not be like freelancing and doing a million other things at the same time. And I think it's what really allowed this film to become what it is, because
Mhm.
Amanda and I and our team were able to just like fully focus once like we left the starting line. So it was great. Yeah.
Congratulations. Yeah. To you both.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Well, unless I've egregiously left anything out.
No, I can't think of anything.
Hmm. Good. Good. Good.
Good
All right.
question.
Well. Oh,
Yeah.
thank you.
You did good. Good job.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you both. Great photo, lovely life. Is there the subtitle, right? It Facing a Family's Secrets? Is
Yes.
that is okay. So it's actually called Great Photo, Lovely Life, Facing a Family Secrets, directed by Amanda Mustard and Rachel Beth Anderson. It's on HBO and on Max. Thank you both. Really.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Adam.
All right. And we'll do this again.
Sounds good.
We don't have to wait 10 years, but we'll do it again.
Yeah, hopefully not.
All right. You guys have a good evening.
Thanks so much. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.